Hello, I'm Robert, and I'm here to fact check the stories that scare you for Doomsday Debunked. You can try our Facebook group, Doomsday Debunked, and there are quite a few fact checkers there will help you if you're scared of something. And do join the group if you're scared yourself. So this is about the new Chinese coronavirus, and this is the latest update. If you look at my debug, I've got a link where you can go to situation reports. That's for the 23rd. And as you can see, there's just one in Japan, one confirmed case in South Korea, and one in United States in Seattle, and two in Thailand, and then all the rest are in China, and there's some in Hong Kong, I believe, and some in Taiwan. But these are just the cases that the people who've been infected. There's very few people have died. Its symptoms are much like the flu, and it's not unless you get it really bad, and it's not a high risk unless you're elderly or have a compromised immune system. And it's not likely to become a pandemic. The big pandemics are flu, and the last one like this was SARS. The SARS one, this one they all talk about in 2003, there were a total of 724 deaths. So if you go and have a look at that, and this one has had 19 deaths so far. That's the SARS cases and deaths. These are just showing the countries and how many there were. This is the number of cases, and these are the number of deaths. So you can see that was the case with the SARS outbreak. But that one, they didn't tell anyone for 3 months after it had started that anything was going on. So this is a very different situation from that. And at the moment, it's not spreading very easily, and it's not many people have died. And you can go and look at the complete list of the people who have died here. Yes, there we are. So I brought that page up there somewhere. There we are, and if you bring it up in Google Translate, and so we're just a little bit further up with the 23rd, and there's a few more. Oh yes, the 571, that's the same number, and so 95 severe cases and 17 deaths, and they have a complete list of all the people who have died and their case histories. So the Chinese are being very open about it, and most of them are quite old and they have some kind of medical condition like liver cirrhosis and myxoma there. Here's another one. Most of them are very. This one's 89 years old. History of hypertension, cerebral infarction, whatever that means, and cerebral softening, and so on. So this is just Google Translate. It's male and referred to as she. It's just Google Translate going funny. So anyway, you can read. As you can see, most of them are quite old, and it's very much similar to flu. The kind of people who are affected by flu, and who very occasionally will die of flu, but the numbers are much less. If you go and look at, so somewhere I've got the list of flu cases. So there we are in 2019 to 2020, the flu burden outbreak. There we are, that's it up there. Then there were 13 million to 18 million affected in the United States, and of those 6,600 to 17,000 people died. So if you compare, so people are getting very scared because one person has been infected in Seattle by this virus, and yet you get 13 to 18 million people get the flu, and you get 6,600 to 17,000 to die of flu. So as you can see at the moment, your risk is very tiny, and it's still mainly people who have either been to Wuhan who have been in close contact, who are in close contact in the same family with someone who's been there, though they are now beginning to find in China some clusters of families, none of whom have actually been to Wuhan. So there's some independent spreading, and not just within the family. There's some actual spreading going on in China. So as I say, so many people panic about this, but nobody's panicking about dying of flu because they're just used to flu. So it's really the case of the unknown that people are worried about, that they're just not used to it. But it's not likely to become a pandemic, although it is expected to become rather larger numbers even than we have so far. So don't be surprised if the numbers increase. And this was before, even when they only had 3 people who had died, they were still saying that there are likely to be quite a few. And it was just based on 3 cases found internationally. And based on that, and on the numbers who were going through Wuhan airport, and that there were 19 million people in the catchment area, then, and just doing some basic epidemiological calculations, they got a figure that there are probably 1,723 cases with symptoms. If this is correct, but it was highly uncertain, it would be anywhere between 427 to over 4,000 at 95% confidence levels. If this is correct, then there are probably quite a few more cases still to be found in China. So if you read that, then it was no real surprise. Now this is a very, very approximate calculation. They knew very little about, and they still know very little about things like its latency and how long you have to wait before you get it. And it's making various assumptions which you can certainly question as to, they can maybe do a better calculation now. We know, fill a few more details in. Back then they had very little idea, and they still don't know very much about how it was formed, about it. But we do have quite a bit more data still. So do expect there to be more people discovered who have this virus. It's very unlikely that we've found all the infected people. And they found, so the 571 confirmed, the 393 suspected, so that could be added on, the 5,897 close contacts, and now 969 of those released from observation, and 4,928 still under medical observation. So obviously it takes quite a while for it to, it could well be 5-7 days, could be more. They don't really know what its period is yet. So it could be that some of these, and then they start exhibiting it. So some of those extra few hundred, or even over 1,000 or more, could turn out to be infected, and there may be others they haven't found yet, and then some more of them surely will die. The 95 severe cases and 17 deaths. Just heard that another one died, so it's 18. So, but a young healthy person shouldn't be at risk. I mean, those were generally old and unhealthy, elderly and unhealthy before they got it. I mean, obviously you're unhealthy if you get it. There is no cure for it. It's just like a cold or a flu. You can antibiotics do nothing for viruses. There isn't any vaccine yet. They obviously will be working on it. Just like a flu vaccine, it's quite difficult to develop. And the treatment is treating the symptoms, and then you help the body to get over it. And then if they're very sick with it, then they have it. They'll eventually end up on a ventilator and with oxygen, and then eventually they die if it's a really bad case for these people who, especially if you've got a challenged immune system. So some people, but most, it's very, very unlikely that most people watching this are not at risk. I mean, if you don't worry about flu, then you shouldn't be worrying about this. And if you're old, well, I mean, like I'm 65. I can get a flu jab every year from 65 onwards, because that's the point at which you begin to have a risk of flu as being considered more significant. So it's a bit like that, elderly people, and it'd be a bit more significant. So, but only if you got close contact with someone who's been to Wuhan, or most likely, especially if you're abroad. So some people have been asking, can it be transferred through items bought from China generally, and bought from Wuhan? And this is from the BBC, and they say there's no evidence that it's a risk. So so far it hasn't been shown that it can even be spread through surfaces contaminated by people coughing or sneezing on them. It can with colds. They don't know yet if this one can be spread in that way at all. And then, if it can, there's still a major question, because the cold viruses tend to survive less than 24 hours outside the human body. So there's one particular that can last for months outside the body, but you wouldn't really you wouldn't expect it. And the most assuring thing is that it seems to require close contact with another member. So even though separate clusters in China, then one of them would have had some close contact with someone else, and then indirectly through that way. And as with all colds and flus, you can protect yourself by washing with soapy water. But if you touch a surface, wash your hands with soapy water, and before you touch your face or your mouth, and then and that's the way to protect yourself. And if you had an object that you have bought, like a teddy bear or something, and if you just wash it with soapy water, if you do want to just take an extra precaution just in case. But it doesn't seem at all likely that that's going to be a way to be infected. As I said, if you're super cautious, you could wash whatever you get from China. And so anyway, those are the main points. So the many suspected cases, but in several different countries, it's as soon as it presents itself and you start getting these symptoms, then they send it off, and the China released the genetic data. Deadly just means some people have died. So now deadly just means now someone has died. So the Chinese released the genetic data. This is back on the January the 11th. So that was really very quick, and so that's so different from SARS. And of course we have much better technology. I mean, back then gene sequencing was in its infancy. There wasn't very much of that, but it was very hard to do. It's now very easy comparatively. And then they send off the sample to a lab and they'd check. So if it's a suspected case, then that's what they'll do. And the ones who were identified early, like the Japanese one, is recovering at home. So what happens if you did get it? Then you'd likely be taken to a hospital. You'd be isolated. They'd look after you, and then after a while you recover. You'd just be sent home, like with the flu. And that's what happened to the Japanese person. Then he was sent home, and he's just staying at home and recovering. He didn't have to stay in hospital all the way to the end. You're not. It's only at the beginning that you're particularly infectious. So that's the situation. The prognosis is for just about everyone it's pretty good, unless you're elderly or and challenged immune system. And then the precautions, according to the CDC, wash hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. And avoid touching your eyes, nose or mouth with unwashed hands. And avoid close contact with people who are sick with symptoms like this, like cold-like symptoms. And then you've seen all these on television, all these people buy masks being sold out, and people queuing up, sort of worried because they haven't managed to get a face mask. But the face mask does very little for this sort of thing. Indeed, it has some value if you yourself have the disease already, to prevent you from coughing it. It's just like putting your arm in front of your mouth. it's stopping it. If you have a face mask and you've already got the disease, then it to some extent will help you stop you infecting others. It does just about nothing to prevent it coming the other way, according to the experts. The doctors do wear masks, but they're surgical masks, but they're tightly fitting. They know how to deal with it. They're very careful with them. The ordinary person is not going to be able to treat it like, especially wearing it all day, taking it on and off. They're not going to dispose of it. They're not going to. They're going to be lifting it up and touching their face. It's really not going to do anything. So they could lower the risk of contracting from a splash from a sneeze or cough, but it's mainly if it's but not if it's carried in the air, and so most people people tend to touch their faces about 23 times an hour. Apparently, I had no idea. Maybe start noticing, see if I do that. But obviously, if you move your mask to touch your face, that's not going to do any good. And so, as one of the doctor, head of emerging infections and zoonosis. Zoonosis is when infections come from an animal to a human being. He said, although there's a perception that the wearing of face masks may be beneficial, there's in fact very little evidence of widespread benefit from their use outside of these clinical settings, where doctors know what they're doing and are very careful. Research also shows that compliance with these recommended behaviours reduces over time when wearing face masks for prolonged periods. People would be better to focus on general good personal and hand hygiene. And respirators, like the people use, medical health professionals, they really do work, but again, you need to know how to use them, and they're no use if you take them off or they're not worn tightly. They're not tightly fitting, they're just again doing nothing. But it's not dangerous like Ebola. It doesn't tend to kill young healthy people. One of the main reasons for of course, you don't want to have the flu anyway. One of the main reasons for protecting themselves is because is to stop the spread of it. Because the more it spreads, the more it's likely to mutate. So that's about the quarantine in the cities. So what if you visit the city? Someone in US was asking that. Oh, nothing. Don't need to give any thought to that. There can't be too many in Seattle who have been to Wuhan, so if you don't have a close contact with someone who's in Wuhan, then you're not likely to be affected by this anyway. And they will go around finding everyone who was closely associated. And even if you've been in the same flight as someone who had it, again, it's not something to worry about, because it just doesn't spread very easily. They didn't find that the whole plane load of people. Just because one person in it. And in the UK we have 2 planes a week. They've started screening. All they do is hand them out leaflets, and they check if they have infrared scanners, and they check their temperature. They wouldn't spot if they were using fever reducing medicine, and they just tell everyone, if you get a cold or something, and go to your local people and saying, I just come from China and I've got a cold, and please look at me. Now, Wikipedia has a pretty good article on this. Some of you may know that I've pretty bad encounters with Wikipedia in the past, but in this particular case, they're extremely mixed. So some articles of Wikipedia are very poor, but some are very good. And for things like this, then they're pretty good. So I've put that up there because you can go to that and go to the Wikipedia article. In fact, I think I put it up there, and it's got loads of information. It tells you about all the confirmed cases and about the confirmed cases. So now Hong Kong, Japan, Macau, Singapore, Taiwan, Vietnam, and these are places where they're confirmed. So now you can't absolutely be certain with Wikipedia. You've got to go and, if you want to be really sure, I mean, I wouldn't write up an article saying, oh, there's been a case in my car, unless you do then go to this footnote, and then you go and check, and then get the translation of that and check. So, but it's pretty good for keeping track, along with everything else. So now the last thing I was going to talk about is where did it come from? And it seems that two more things. We'll talk about how it's not a pandemic. So it seems very likely that at the moment, it's not confirmed, but it seems very likely, pretty good evidence, that it actually came from bats via snakes. It just might seem quite strange, especially, in fact, it's only fairly recently I've just been reading that they discovered viruses in snakes at all, depended on being able to very easily detect viruses. But apparently snakes get viruses, and snakes of course eat bats, but it seems they can eat bats very occasionally. I don't know if it's a big prey item of snakes, but they think it's most likely that the snakes were. So this was a market for selling fish, seafood, and live animals, because the Chinese in China for them to eat, and there were live bats. So apparently the Chinese eat bats and live snakes. You know what it is with Chinese, they eat almost anything. They've got a very widespread kind of a wide range of what they eat. And so they eat snakes and they eat bats, which would be quite a rare thing to eat in the UK. And the bats and the snakes would have been probably in close quarters in the same market, and then how did it get from them? So then they were kept in close quarters. It came from the virus, so it is basically a bat virus. They looked at several different and had a look at a wide range of specimens from many different animals of viruses, and this matched the bat viruses, but it shows signs of having combined genetic recombination with a virus from a snake. And so, they think that the virus itself, the reservoir, is in a snake. And it's going to be quite difficult to find out which snake, because the market's been cleared of everyone and been disinfected. So you can't just go around the stores looking at the snakes to try and find it. So the evidence in a way has been kind of destroyed. And I mean, not intentionally, but that's been the effect. So I don't know if they're going to have quite a job finding out where it actually came from, but it may have been a result of virus from bats and snakes combining, and probably because them being kept in slow close quarters can happen in food markets, and then it could have been in the secretions of feces of the snakes, and then be breathed in if there were enough snakes and enough people. And then a lot of bustle around and handling the snakes, and the little bits and pieces, just tiny bits of dust from the feces of the snakes ending up in the faces of the and be getting into the human beings. So it's not just speculation, it's quite good evidence, but it is not confirmed at all. But that seems quite a likely route at present. So, and finally, I want to talk a little bit about pandemics. So, just to finish this off. So, the big pandemics of the past are flu, not coronaviruses. And there have been times when there have been millions of people have died of the flu, like the 1918 flu. Now, this is not likely to happen nowadays, because medicine is much better than it was back then. So you sometimes get these scare headlines saying we could have millions of people dying of flu. Now, but we don't risk millions of people dying of this, because it's it's much more restricted kind of a thing. It's not very likely. It's not like flu; it doesn't spread, so it's not so difficult to contain as flu. But you often get, and even the WHO in one of their reports. So when I wrote this article, I checked up the WHO report, and it was a case of Chinese whispers. It was very strange when I looked this up, and CNN reporting WHO, the WHO, and then it reported someone else, and then someone else reported someone else. Yeah, that's the WHO report, and then they got the report from someone else, and they got the report from someone else, and then the first site was to them, and then if you go back to the original site, then it says it talks about what if you had a world that is as crowded as it is today, but you only had the medicine of 1918, then how many people would die? And that is where that figure comes from, the 50 or 80 million figure. And so that was published in a paper, which then got into a site, and then somehow along the way, then it got a paper which then was put into I think a news story, and then the WHO had then a report that cited the news story, which had left out some details, and then that report became eventually cited by the WHO. So it sort of gained respectability with none of the researchers going all the way back to the original. And this is something that happens when I was working on my postgraduate. Then, I learnt to not take something. So that's something I learnt when I was doing my postgraduate maths. Many people would have just gone to the WHO report and just said, well, the WHO say that. But to go back and back and back and find out where it came from originally, because you get people you get these things which gain respectability by being cited, and then recited, and then recited, until it becomes a thing that is commonly held belief. But it was actually, so I mean, I expect, maybe, I don't know how I got into the WHO report. It's quite strange, but it wasn't kind of central to the report. It was more just like a little, this little tidbit of information. It is very important to do this stuff. Look at this example of someone worked out, but so as you say, that 50 to 80 million figure is, and that's where you tend to get these things happening. That people say, it's incidental. It's not the main thing they're focusing. It's not the bit of the report that they check and recheck and double check, and then you get these little factoids kind of creeping in that aren't really true. So that's based on the bets of 1918, and there's really absolutely no risk of that happening today, because medicine has moved on tremendously since 1918. That's an entire century ago. And if that same pandemic, if 1918 flu happened today, we wouldn't have 50 to 80 million. We'd be very much confined. And then another one is the people cite Bill Gates, who said a future, according to them, he said a future flu epidemic, potentially 30 million, would die in 6 months. So kind of similar figure, tens of millions. But if you go and follow that up, then what he actually says is that he says, suppose we had a new disease, suppose we have no vaccine for it, suppose everyone is susceptible, and suppose everyone infects on average 2.1 more people. It starts in East Asia, and absolutely nothing is done to stop it. I mean, that is what we call, you can call a toy model. I mean, it's just a totally hypothetical thing. There's no way that any disease is going to be like that. It's absolutely totally unrealistic. But he did that in order to highlight what a big difference it makes, all the measures we do to stop these things. So potentially it could be 30 million if was naively people doing absolutely nothing, no medicine, nothing being done to do anything to stop it. I'm still talking here about flu, not about coronavirus. There's no risk at all of anything like this happening for coronavirus. But I'm saying this because some people then worry about pandemics, and then pandemics generally, and again, that is hugely exaggerated in the media. So they take one or other of these figures and they'll say 30 million or they'll say 50 or 80 million, and both of these are totally unrealistic. So if you get someone saying, oh, we risk having 30 million people die of flu, then this is where it comes from. It's just not true. And Bill Gates, of course, he's been very involved in working with infectious diseases, and he gave this talk for the very reason to help prevent future outbreaks and pandemics. So just the opposite of how it's being used by the inner sensationalist people, just saying 30 million people are going to die, when his very point was, look at all these things we're doing to stop it and to stop something like this happening. That's what he was saying. If you go and click through. Anyway, so that's it. I'll leave you a link to all this, and I hope this helps some of you be a little bit less scared of all this, and just to do those precautions the CDC do. If you are worried about this, just wash your hands for 20 seconds and before you touch your face. But that is good to do anyway, to protect yourself from flu. And flu is by far more of a risk. You're far, far, far more at risk of dying of flu than you are of dying of this coronavirus. But it's the same precautions for both. So if you're out and about in the city, and especially if you're rather elderly, or you've got a compromised immune system, you're very sick, then it's a good idea to wash your hands before touching your face and putting your fingers in your mouth or whatever. After touching surfaces which could have been infected. Especially, and to avoid, if you're susceptible to flu, and to obviously avoid people who've got symptoms of the flu. If you've got compromised immune system and you're rather elderly, or get your flu jab. But I mean, for this, it's really it's not something you need to worry about. It's not unless you're one of the people. If you're in China, and if it is like you've got it, then chances are you're one of these. However many it was, I gave the number a minute ago. You're probably one of the 4,928 who are still under medical observation already. So you don't need me to tell you, because you're probably already under medical observation. And as soon as they find any more cases reported, then they'll do the same. They'll go and find everyone that they've been in contact with, in close contact. So anyway, just it's not something to worry about. I hope that helped a bit. I'll do the usual end things. So I'll put the links to all this in the description. I'll just do the links one below the other, so if you want to open them up. But most of them will just come from this page, so I'll put this page first. In fact, I think probably they all do. And if you want to do subscribe to my channel, if you want to see more videos like this. If you get scared of things like this, then our Facebook group, Doomsday Debunked, then there are lots of fact checkers there, and you can just go there and post and say something you're scared of, and then you may well, if someone is likely to respond fairly quickly, at least being reassuring and helpful, and then after a little while someone may come along who knows a fair bit about it, or at least can go and search on the internet, and in a way they know how to do it, and how to find the right sources, the reliable sources, and they're not panicking and in a confused mind like you are, and other people like you, who can help you. And if anybody watching this, is expert on things that can come and help and help in the group, then do again join and help be as one of the debunkers to help scared people and tell them what the facts are, just like I am doing right now. And it's pretty straightforward. I mean, if you've learned to, I haven't studied, I don't know anything about, I didn't even study biology. I studied maths and physics and chemistry at school, and at university I was maths, but I've learned how to, just the methods of doing academic research and finding out and checking the reliable sources, and basically like a very responsible science journalist and not alarmist. And just if you are able to do that sort of thing as well, then that could be very helpful, and you've got the time to do it. Then it really is a case of straightforwardly applying the same sort of methods that you use for academic research to just go around finding out what's reliable, and then summarising what you see in it. And I mean, it depends on the field of it's very much like academic research what I do here. And then it's a case of finding how to communicate it to people in easy to use, to complete as clearly as possible, short, simple sentences, straightforward examples, and that's what we do basically. Anyway, that's it.